Some of the best-selling butter brands in America contain almost no real cream. And here's the part most people never find out. A few of them charge premium prices to do exactly that. On the shelf, they all look simple. They all look honest. Every brand shows you the same thing. Clean packaging, the image of a dairy farm, pretty words like churned and pure. But turn the tub around and read the actual ingredient list, and a completely different picture appears right before your eyes. Purified water listed first. Soybean oil second. A yogurt promise on the front that in the end accounts for only a tiny fraction of the formula. Vegetable oils processed with industrial chemical solvents, with no mention of that anywhere on the front of the label. This is the game that repeats itself, tub after tub, brand after brand. And the most striking part is that you've probably taken one or two of these home already, trusting the packaging, never once looking at what was written on the back in fine print. Today, we're going to count down 10 brands that deserve a good second look before they land in your cart, saving the worst of them all for the grand finale. A product that is 70% water and still presents itself as something for you to spread on your bread. And then, so you don't leave here with only bad news, I'm going to reveal the 5 brands that are genuinely real butter, from the best everyday option to the single best tub that, in my opinion, you can buy right now. And pay attention, every fact in this video comes straight from reading the label, from what the law itself allows or does not allow to be called butter. But before we begin, do me a small kindness that helps me a great deal. Leave your like here on the video, because that's how this information reaches more people who've been spending money on water and oil without knowing it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next warnings about what's really inside the food you bring home. And tell me down in the comments, which butter brand is in your refrigerator right now, and what city and state are you watching from? I make a point of knowing who's here with me on this. Deal? Then let's get right to it. Our countdown begins with a brand that carries a lot of history on its back. Breakstones, which has been producing butter in upstate New York since the 1800s. For decades, it held a distinction no one else could touch. For a long time, it was the only kosher-certified butter on the market. Every ingredient met kosher standards, with no risk of cross-contamination, for shoppers who need that assurance for religious reasons. It was, quite literally, the only door open for those families. And that, on its own, is a real merit worth respecting. But here's the point almost no one stops to think about. Kosher certification speaks to religious compliance, and that's an important thing, no doubt. But it tells you absolutely nothing about the flavor, the source of the milk, or what the cows have been eating. Those are completely different worlds. And it's Breakstone's unsalted butter that makes that gap visible right away, the moment you open the package and look at it closely. The color gives everything away. Look carefully, because this is a detail worth its weight in gold when choosing any butter at all. Breakstones is one of the palest butters on any grocery shelf, with a yellow tint that barely shows up. And that color, or rather that lack of color, is a direct signal of what you're holding. Cows raised on pasture, eating grass, produce milk rich in beta-carotene. And it's that beta-carotene that gives real butter its natural golden hue. A nearly white butter, on the other hand, tends to point to cows fed on grain, which usually produces a blander tasting butter. And the flavor, unfortunately, confirms what the color already announced. But then something even stranger happens. There you are, eating an unsalted butter, expecting that clean, neutral taste of cream, and suddenly you sense a slightly tangy, slightly sour note on your tongue. And you ask yourself, where is that coming from if it's unsalted? The answer is buried at the bottom of the ingredient list, in that vague phrase, natural flavors, with no further detail. The rules permit that vagueness, and brands are under no obligation to tell you what exactly those flavors are. So in place of the clean butter flavor you were expecting, you get a mystery ingredient doing something your taste buds never asked for. And don't get me wrong, Breakstones holds its little corner of the kosher aisle very well because it has almost no competition there. And for those who need that certification, it does its job. But outside of that specific need, honestly, there are very few reasons to reach for it. And if this one opens our countdown by raising doubts, the next brand on our list is a giant that nearly everyone has at home. And that's where the story starts to get more complicated. At number 9, we have a true giant of the aisle. Land O'Lakes, with an enormous number of units sold every single year. This brand absolutely dominates, and I want to be fair from the start. The plain, classic butter does exactly what butter is supposed to do. There's no complaint there. But this brand doesn't only sell plain butter, and that's precisely where the story gets complicated, in the blends and the lighter versions that fill the shelf beside the original. The butter and canola oil blends are enormously popular, and for a real reason. They solve an everyday problem. Regular butter is hard to spread straight from the fridge, while a canola blend stays soft at refrigerator temperature. That convenience is genuine, nobody can deny it. But the canola oil used here comes with a detail the brand doesn't advertise on the front. It's a refined oil processed with a chemical solvent used in the extraction stage. And while experts agree only trace amounts survive into the final product, the honest issue is that long-term data on low-level daily exposure over many years is simply limited. That's the part the label leaves out. Then there's the light blend, and this is where I'd ask you to really pay attention. The ingredient list includes a whole lineup of items with complicated names: modified food starch, maltodextrin, mono and diglycerides, several preservatives, natural flavor, gums, and added coloring. Now compare that to the truth of the matter. Real butter has two ingredients: cream and salt. That's it. The light blend does have fewer calories. That part is true. What it doesn't tell you clearly is what filled the space where the fat used to be. And that's the trap of the word light in this whole category. Fewer calories is not the same thing as a better product. That empty space left by the removed fat gets filled by a lineup of additives, some of which can affect blood sugar, some of which can cause digestive discomfort in more sensitive people. The label is counting on you not to make that distinction, on you reading only the word light on the front and feeling good about your choice, without turning the tub around. So the lesson from Land O'Lakes is a subtle one, and it's worth carrying with you through the rest of this list. The problem here isn't always the plain butter, which is fine. The problem is how easily a trusted name on the front leads you toward blends and, quote, light versions that are a very different product from what you think you're buying. Read the tub, always. And speaking of trusted names that hide a surprise in the fine print, the next brand on our list is one you'll find in nearly every big store in the country, sold as the smart budget choice. At number 8, we have the store brand budget champion, Great Value Butter from Walmart. With a proper certification stamp and a rock-bottom price, it looks like the smart shopper's slam dunk. Real butter, real certification, hard to argue with at first glance. And then you learn about a detail that changes the conversation, one that has to do with a synthetic growth hormone used in some dairy cows. That hormone is injected into dairy cows to push them to produce more milk than their biology would naturally allow. And here's the striking part. The European Union restricts it. Canada restricts it. Australia restricts it. The United Kingdom restricts it. Much of the developed world looked at the toll it can take on the animal's welfare and decided the extra yield simply wasn't worth it. In the United States, it remains legal, and the plain Great Value butter carries no guarantee that it's free of that hormone. And here's what makes that particularly interesting. Pick up a carton of Great Value milk at that very same Walmart, and you'll often see a pledge right on the label that it's free of that hormone. Walmart made that commitment for its milk. It chose not to extend it to its butter. Same store, same brand, two different sets of rules. A shopper who carefully selects the hormone-free milk and then grabs the butter from the very same dairy case may have no idea those two products were made under entirely different standards. Reach for the Great Value spread with canola oil, and there's another layer to it. The canola oil and the added coloring dull the flavor and introduce an artificial undertone that really doesn't belong anywhere near your morning toast. And there's a complaint that comes up again and again. The tub is routinely not full. Shoppers have opened 15-ounce tubs to find something closer to 11 ounces of actual spread inside, with the rest being air. You end up paying for the packaging almost as much as you're paying for the food itself. So the takeaway with Great Value is that the lowest price on the shelf almost always comes with a fine print cost you weren't told about at the register. And that's not a moral failing on your part. Budgets are real and tight for a lot of families. But now you know what that low number is actually buying. And if a quiet double standard between the milk and the butter surprised you, the next brand on our list wraps itself in the boldest health language of them all. And that's exactly where we need to slow down and read. At number 7 is what might be the most aggressive health promise in the entire spread category: Smart Balance. Heart-healthy fats, omega-3s, low trans fats. It reads like something developed hand in hand with cardiologists to actively protect your heart. But examine the actual product, and the picture becomes considerably less convincing. Let's start with that omega-3 claim, printed in bold right on the front of the tub. Most people see the words omega-3 and immediately think of the omega-3 found in oily fish, the forms backed by decades of research on heart health and brain function. But what this product actually contains is a plant-based omega-3, and here's the catch: these two are not interchangeable. The human body can convert the plant form into the ones your heart truly benefits from, but it does so at a poor, inefficient rate. And the amount printed on that front label isn't a quantity that moves any meaningful needle, even under the best conditions. If what you truly want is the kind of omega-3 your heart actually benefits from, you're far better off eating a small handful of chia seeds, hemp seeds, or walnuts. More usable quantity, a fraction of the cost, and no misleading packaging required. The whole omega-3 headline here takes a real, respected nutritional concept and deploys it in a way that's technically defensible, but practically misleading to the person standing in the aisle. Then there's the question of what this product fundamentally is. Buttery spread is a legal designation for a yellow, butter-like alternative, and it carries no requirement to contain any butter whatsoever. This product is built largely from vegetable oils, which places it below the fat threshold required to even legally be called margarine. So let's be clear, it's not butter and it's not even margarine. It's a spread dressed up in the language of a health supplement. And that's the real concern with Smart Balance. Someone buys this specifically because they believe it's protecting their heart, that they're making the responsible, health-conscious choice for their family. But that belief isn't fully supported by what's actually sitting in the tub. The healthy-sounding words are doing work the ingredient list can't back up. Read past the front, always. And if health language wrapped around a spread got your attention, the next brand built its entire fame on a single brilliant piece of marketing, one that convinced a whole generation of a thing that simply wasn't true. At number 6, we have a brand whose marketing you almost have to admire, even as it works against you. I can't believe it's not butter. Think about the trick in that name for a second. When a brand puts the word butter in large type on the front of the package, that's the word your brain locks onto. The "I can't believe it's not" part functions almost like invisible fine print, even when it's sitting right there in plain sight. The brand knows exactly how your eyes work. The product is described as having a rich, buttery flavor and is positioned as a direct stand-in for butter in just about any situation. The implication is clear, even when the literal claim technically isn't. Older tubs listed the vegetable oil percentage right on the label, but that information has quietly slipped off the packaging over the years. What remains is a product built primarily on water and various oils, and it tends to taste exactly like that. The mouthfeel is off, the flavor is thin, and there's no richness because there's no cream. But the detail in this lineup that deserves the most attention is the cooking spray. Consumers filed a lawsuit against the company over the 0 calories per spray advertising. And the reason why is worth understanding, because it applies to a lot of products. The rules allow a spray to list 0 calories if a single serving, defined as a fraction of a second spray, contains under a certain tiny amount. But nobody uses a fraction of a second spray when they're actually cooking dinner. In real-world use, those calories and grams of fat add up fast, and the full bottle contains a meaningful amount of both, nowhere near the 0 the front implies. The argument was that the 0-calorie claim was materially misleading, given how the product is actually used in a real kitchen. And here's another quiet contrast, that spray is the one product in the lineup that leans on artificial preservatives, which sits oddly against the natural-sounding image the brand projects everywhere else. So the whole story of this brand lives in that name. It tells you, right on the front, that it's not butter. It just bet that you wouldn't fully register the words while your eyes were locked on the big letters. And now that you're reading the whole label instead of the headline, that bet stops working. And if a clever name was enough to fool a generation, The next brand did something similar decades ago, with a talking tub on television that insisted, against all evidence, that it was butter. At number 5 is a brand that older viewers will remember from television, Parquet. If you were around for those commercials in the 70s and 80s, you might remember the famous ads where the tub of spread would speak up and insist that it was butter. Clever, memorable, and it built a genuine belief in an entire generation that Parquet was, in some meaningful way, equivalent to the real thing. It wasn't then, and it isn't now. Parquet is made primarily from a blend of vegetable oils, held together with the standard array of preservatives. And the detail that really deserves your attention is the flavoring, or rather, the lack of disclosure around it. The product lists both natural and artificial flavors, with no further specification whatsoever. Artificial flavorings are often synthesized from sources that don't start out as food at all, and we simply don't know which specific compounds are being used here. And that's the recurring theme you're starting to notice across this whole list, isn't it? No comprehensive long-term research tracks what daily consumption of these unnamed compounds does over years and years of use. It's not that we have proof of harm, it's that we have a blank space where the answers should be. And the label is perfectly happy to leave that space blank while you spread it on your toast every single morning. Then there's the Parquet Squeeze Bottle, a liquid product that includes cottonseed oil. And this one carries a concern most other vegetable oils don't. Cotton is a textile crop, not a food crop. It's one of the most heavily pesticide-treated crops in all of agriculture, treated with compounds developed for industrial purposes, not for something meant to end up in the food supply. The refining process removes most of those residues, but there's no guarantee it removes every last trace, and rigorous long-term studies are thin on the ground. So every time that squeeze bottle gets used, a small unknown gets quietly accepted along with it. And real butter simply doesn't come with that conversation attached. Cream and salt don't require a footnote about industrial crops. That's the whole point we keep circling back to on this list. And if a talking tub built a false belief on television, the next brand built its own image on the single, most powerful health word in the grocery store, yogurt. At number 4, we have the one positioned as the health-conscious choice, Brummel and Brown. Made with real yogurt, zero trans fat, a clean and gentle design. A shopper trying to make a smarter swap away from regular butter could very easily be convinced that this is the answer they've been looking for. But when you read the tub, it isn't quite the answer it appears to be. Right there on the container, in print that most people walk right past, it identifies itself as a vegetable oil spread, sitting well below the fat level required to be called either butter or margarine. That classification matters more than it seems. Butter requires at least 80% fat. Fall far below that threshold, and you can legally claim to be neither butter nor margarine. This product, built mostly on other things, doesn't come close to either category. And about that yogurt, the front label makes such a point of highlighting. When you actually read the list, the yogurt accounts for only a small slice of the whole formula. The first 2 ingredients are purified water and soybean oil. The yogurt appears well after that, followed by more oil and a line of additives. In other words, the ingredient the brand leads with and builds its entire identity around is sitting far down the list, behind the very things most health-conscious shoppers are actively trying to avoid. So what you're really buying here is a water and oil emulsion dressed up in the comforting language of health and wellness. The front label is doing all the heavy lifting that the actual product can't do on its own. And that's the pattern. The more a tub leans on a single reassuring word on the front, the more it's worth your time to flip it over and see where that word actually falls in the lineup. None of this means yogurt is bad, or that wanting a lighter option is wrong. It just means the picture on the front and the truth on the back are telling 2 different stories, and only one of them is legally binding. Read the one on the back, and if a health halo built on a trace of yogurt gave you pause, the next brand carries decades of history and a past that's a good deal heavier than its cheerful budget image suggests. At number 3 is a name built for the budget-conscious family, Bluebonnet. It was created long ago as an affordable alternative back when butter was a genuine luxury for many households. And for a real period of time, it was a legitimate margarine. But that era is long over. What the Bluebonnet name is attached to today is a vegetable oil spread, sitting well below the line for margarine and nowhere near butter. The primary oils are the usual blend, and the formula carries several artificial preservatives along with artificial flavoring. But the history here matters more than most people realize. For decades, this brand relied on partially hydrogenated oil, which was once a major dietary source of industrial trans fats. The kind now conclusively linked to heart disease, not for a year or two, but for decades. And the reformulation across the industry only happened when regulators eventually required it. Today, the brand promotes that its spread has less fat and less cholesterol than butter. That part is technically true. What tends to go unmentioned is what replaced those fats in the formula. A combination of artificial preservatives that can cause digestive issues for some, and that, in more sensitive individuals, have been associated in research with other effects worth being aware of. Less fat on the front doesn't tell you the whole story of what moved in to take the fat's place. And that's really the lesson of Bluebonnet's long history. A brand that stood behind a formula carrying a real cardiovascular concern for decades, and that changed course only when it was required to, is telling you something quiet but clear about where product quality actually sits on its list of priorities. It's not that the current product is the villain of the century. It's that the track record invites a healthy skepticism toward whatever the front of the tub is promising you today. So when you see a familiar, comforting budget name that's been around since your childhood, that familiarity isn't the same thing as quality. It's just familiarity. The label still deserves the same careful, second look you'd give any newcomer on the shelf. And now we're down to the final two on the avoid list. And both of them are masters of one particular trick, making the packaging itself the most carefully engineered thing in the entire product. At number 2, we have a tub with a particular warmth to it, Country Crock. The barn illustration, the word churned, the whole feeling of implied American heritage and tradition. The packaging is designed to make you feel like you're bringing home something wholesome and old-fashioned, the way your grandmother might have made it. But the ingredient reality tells a rather different story. Let's start with the plant-based lines, because this is where the brand has drawn organized pushback from more than one direction. Consumers have raised legal challenges over the plant-based versions that headline a premium oil, like olive oil or avocado oil, right on the front of the package. The central argument is straightforward, that premium oil is the selling point, the very thing that justifies choosing this over a cheaper alternative, and yet it makes up only a small fraction of the actual formula, with the bulk built from far cheaper oils. On top of that, industry groups representing real dairy producers have filed formal complaints with regulators about the use of the word butter on products that contain no dairy whatsoever. Their argument is simple. Butter is, by definition, a dairy product, and a blend of plant oils is not. Whatever side of that debate you land on, the complaint itself points to the same theme we keep running into: a front label that's working hard to suggest something the ingredients don't fully deliver. And as for the original Country Crock, the version that's been in American refrigerators for generations, it is now a vegetable oil spread, sitting well below the margarine line. But here's the detail that reveals most clearly how carefully this packaging is designed. That vegetable oil percentage is printed in green ink against a green background. You would have to be actively hunting for it to find it. What catches your eye instead is the barn and the word churned. Most of what you're buying is water and oil, and the packaging is, without a doubt, the most carefully made thing in the tub. So Country Crock is a masterclass in directing your attention exactly where the brand wants it and away from where it doesn't. And that's not an accident. That's design. The warmth, the barn, the heritage, all of it is engineered to keep your eyes off the one line that actually tells you what you're holding. And now, at last, we reach number 1 on the avoid list. The tub that takes the top spot for all the wrong reasons. A product that is mostly water wearing the costume of something you'd spread on bread. At number 1 on our avoid list is Imperial, a spread that has existed in various formulations for decades, and by many accounts, has been a disappointment in nearly every one of them. The current product is perhaps the clearest example on this whole list of what happens when a brand abandons any real commitment to what it's supposed to be making in the first place. Because when you read the label, the number you find is genuinely hard to believe. This product is sold with a vegetable oil content so low that it doesn't credibly qualify as much of anything by any meaningful standard. It's nowhere near margarine. It's nowhere near butter. If there are baseline expectations for what makes a legitimate food product in this category, this one operates well below them. And the price signals all of it before you even read a single ingredient, sitting at just a few dollars for a large tub, a number that tells you everything about the priorities behind it. But here's what that low-fat content actually means for the rest of what's inside. Roughly 70% of the tub is purified water. No cream, no dairy of any kind. Read that again and let it sink in. You are purchasing a water and oil mixture that has been emulsified and packaged to look like something you'd happily spread on your morning bread. The picture on the front and the reality in the tub could hardly be further apart. And when you actually taste it, the gap between what this is and what it implies becomes something you physically feel in your mouth. It lands flat on the tongue and leaves a greasy film that coats the inside of your mouth and just doesn't clear. That's what happens when oil and water don't have enough fat between them to bind properly. The oil just sits there because nothing in the formula creates the cohesion that real butter or even a decent margarine naturally produces. It tastes like a product that costs a few dollars for a giant tub, because that is precisely what it is. And look, tight budgets are real, and people will keep buying this, and there's no shame in that. But you now know exactly what that low price is actually buying, mostly water, with a label quietly implying something else entirely. And that's the bottom of our list. Now that you know what to be wary of, let's turn the page completely, because there are brands out there that genuinely held up. And the first of the 5 is one you can put on your table every single day. Now that you know what to watch out for, here are the brands that actually earned their place. And we begin the good news at best option number 5, Tillamook. This has been a respected dairy institution in the Pacific Northwest for well over a century, and the standard it holds across its entire range, its ice cream, its cheese, its butter, is remarkably consistent. No corners cut. The butter upholds that reputation completely. It sits comfortably above the 80% milk fat floor in both the salted and unsalted versions. And the difference from those bare minimum butters is apparent immediately. It's extra creamy in a way that hints at good cheese, but without any of the sharp dairy edge. It spreads smoothly, it melts cleanly, and the flavor is simply what butter is supposed to taste like. No chemical tang, no artificial undertone, no oiliness, just cream and salt. Because that is literally the entire ingredient list. What makes Tillamook work so well as an everyday butter is exactly where it sits on the fat spectrum. It's above the 80% floor, but below the sheer intensity of a full European-style butter. And that balance is the secret. It means the butter integrates cleanly across a wide range of recipes, giving you real flavor and real lift without overpowering the more delicate baked goods the way a richer, more intense butter sometimes can. It's a team player in the kitchen. At a fair price for a full pound at major retailers, it does cost more than anything on the avoid list, and I won't pretend otherwise. But here's the trade you're making. It will also never hand you a disappointing result. There's a quiet confidence in a butter that's just consistently, reliably good, day in and day out, without any drama. You reach for it, it does its job beautifully, and it never surprises you in a bad way. So for the home cook who wants one dependable, honest butter to handle everyday cooking and baking without a second thought, this is the answer. It's the kind of quality that doesn't shout, but shows up every time you ask it to. And if a reliable everyday workhorse is what you need, the next brand climbs the ladder in sourcing, with a story that starts not in the factory, but out in the open pasture, where the cows actually live. At best option number 4, we have a brand that separates itself through where its milk comes from, Vital Farms. Most American butter brands hit the 80% milk fat floor and simply stop there. This one doesn't operate that way at all. Its butter lands a few points higher, and that additional fat is immediately noticeable in absolutely everything it touches, from a slice of toast to a finished cake. But sourcing is where this brand makes its clearest separation from the pack. The cows producing this milk are largely grass-fed, and the breed selection is deliberate, favoring breeds that naturally produce cream richer and higher in fat than the standard commercial dairy cow. The result is a butter with a deep, natural golden color that comes directly from the beta-carotene in the grass itself. No artificial colorants, no lab-added anything, just what happens when cows eat what they evolved to eat. And the ingredient list reflects that honesty perfectly: milk and salt. That is the complete list, start to finish. There's something almost refreshing about turning a tub around after everything we just covered on the avoid list and finding nothing but the 2 words that are supposed to be there. No solvents, no gums, no mystery flavors filling a space where fat should be. Just the thing itself. For baking in particular, that higher fat and lower moisture produce real, measurable results you can see with your own eyes. Cakes rise more fully, cookies crisp more evenly, and the genuine butter flavor carries all the way through the finished product in a way that a bare minimum 80% butter simply cannot replicate. When butter is meant to be the star of the recipe, this is the kind that actually shows up and performs. The honest caveat, as always, is the price. A block of it runs noticeably higher than your everyday option. And for daily toast or morning eggs, that's genuinely hard to justify every single week. But for baking, for the moments where butter is the entire reason the recipe exists, it's absolutely the right call. It's a special occasion butter, and it earns that role. And if pasture-raised sourcing impressed you, the next brand comes at quality from a completely different angle. One born not on a farm, but in professional kitchens. At best option number 3, we have a quiet professional secret, Plugger. This one doesn't announce itself at all. Plain foil wrapper, no bold health claims, no celebrity behind it, no heartwarming story printed on the package. In a dairy aisle built entirely to capture your attention, this is the one that gets walked past constantly, and that is a genuine loss for every shopper who misses it. It was developed for professional pastry chefs and culinary kitchens, not for the retail shelf, and the standard was built accordingly. It meets the European butter specification for fat content, and it earned a professional culinary seal of approval years ago that made it a staple in serious cooking circles ever since. It's in regular grocery stores now, sitting right there in plain sight, and most home cooks have absolutely no idea what they're walking past. The plain butter delivers exactly what professional kitchens rely on it for. Mashed potatoes that taste noticeably more considered and refined. Pastry dough with better layering and structure. Sauces with more depth and body. It's the kind of upgrade you feel in the final dish, even when you can't quite put your finger on why. But the spreadable version with sea salt and olive oil deserves specific attention, and not just for the flavor. Because after everything we covered on the avoid list, all those solvents and gums and preservatives, here is a butter spread with added olive oil that contains just a small handful of ingredients: cream, olive oil, salt, and natural flavors. No chemical solvents, no artificial preservatives, no additives filling the space where fat should be. Just a few ingredients that genuinely belong together, combined well, producing something that's honestly excellent. And that's the whole point this brand quietly proves. Every product on the avoid list that loads a butter blend with a dozen additives is making a deliberate choice to do so. This one makes the exact opposite choice, and the product is better for it. It's proof that clean and simple isn't a limitation, it's a decision. And if a chef's quiet secret earned your respect, the next brand takes flavor itself to a place you may not have known butter could go. At best option number 2, we reach something that might change your whole idea of what butter can taste like. Vermont Creamery and its European-style cultured butter. If you've never used a cultured butter before, This one will genuinely reset your frame of reference because the production method is fundamentally different from nearly everything else in this category. So what does cultured actually mean in practice? Fresh cream is allowed to gently ferment before it's ever churned. Live cultures are introduced and held overnight, and during that time, they build a flavor complexity that no additive or processing shortcut could ever replicate. The result is a butter that tastes like a natural collaboration between butter and a fine yogurt, savory, pleasantly tangy in a way that's completely earned, and deeply rich in a way that's immediately distinct from anything else on your table. The fat content supports that whole profile, sitting among the highest commercially available in the country, and the texture is correspondingly velvety. It coats the palate and lingers, in the very best possible sense of that word. This is butter treated as a craft rather than a commodity, and it has earned formal recognition from respected culinary and dairy organizations to back that up. Professional bakers who try it tend not to go back to anything else. The price places it as a treat rather than a daily staple, and honestly, it ranks here rather than at the very top for reasons of pure practicality. Its sheer intensity and richness aren't suited to every single recipe, and the price makes daily use hard to sustain for most families. It's a butter you reach for on purpose, for a specific reason, when you want it to be noticed. But for those applications where butter is the entire point of what you're making, where you want people to pause and ask what makes this taste so good, almost nothing on this list is better. It's an experience as much as an ingredient. And if a cultured butter opened your eyes to what's possible, that brings us, at last, to the single brand that tends to end every conversation about which butter is truly worth buying. And at best option number one, we arrive at the name where this conversation almost always ends. Kerrygold Pure Irish Butter. When people talk about which butter is genuinely worth buying, this is where the discussion tends to land, and it holds a nearly unanimous position as one of the best tasting butters you can find on a shelf in this country. Very little credible argument against it gets far. The foundation, as it so often is the sourcing. The cows graze on outdoor pasture for a remarkable portion of the year, something the Irish climate makes possible in a way most dairy regions simply can't sustain. The grass grows nearly year-round, the land stays consistently green, and the cows eat what ruminants evolved to eat. The effect on the butter is direct, measurable, and visible before you even break the wrapper. It meets the European standard for milk fat, and it carries a deep, natural golden yellow that requires no artificial coloring of any kind. That gold comes straight from the grass, through the milk, and into the butter. You can quite literally see the difference in sourcing before you ever taste it. The flavor, when you do, is unlike standard American butter in a way that's immediately obvious. A certain floral quality, a natural sweetness sitting just underneath the creaminess, and a richness that never feels dense or heavy. And here's the point that ties this whole video together, the point the entire avoid list refuses to acknowledge. The spreadable version of this butter, soft and ready, straight from the refrigerator, contains just two ingredients, cream and salt. Nothing else. No emulsifiers, no preservatives, no chemical assistance. It achieves the exact thing that other brands told you required a dozen additives to accomplish, and it does it with nothing but cream and salt. Every brand on the avoid list knows that an honest, clean product is entirely achievable. They simply chose margin over it. This one made the other choice, and that is precisely why it sits at the very top. So the next time you're standing in the butter aisle, you'll know what two ingredients actually looks like. You'll know that cream and salt is the benchmark, the gold standard. And you'll know that anything beyond those two simple words is always worth a second look. And now you know exactly what that second look might find. So let me leave you with the one thread that runs through this entire list, because it's the most useful thing you can carry out of here. Notice what all 5 of the best brands have in common. Not one of them needs artificial flavors, synthetic preservatives, or chemically processed oils to make a product genuinely worth buying. What they need is good milk from well-fed cows and a process that respects the ingredient. That's it. That's the whole secret. And here's the part that ought to stay with you. The brands on the avoid list know this too. They aren't failing to reach quality by accident, stumbling and falling short despite their best efforts. They are, in most cases, simply choosing not to pursue it because water and oil and additives cost less than cream, and the space where the fat should be can be filled with something cheaper. That's not a mystery. That's a business decision, made tub by tub. I also want to be fair and honest with you, the way we've tried to be all along. Tight budgets are real, and there is no shame whatsoever in buying what you can afford to feed your family. This was never about making anyone feel guilty for what's in their refrigerator right now. It was about handing you the one tool nobody at the store is going to hand you, the ability to turn the tub around, read the truth on the back, and decide for yourself with your eyes fully open. And a quick, sensible word of caution, because it matters. Everything here comes from reading labels and understanding legal categories, not from a lab or a doctor's office. If you have specific dietary needs, a heart condition, allergies, or any real health concern, the person to guide your choices is a doctor or a registered dietitian who knows your situation, not a tub of spread with confident words on the front. Use this video as a starting point for asking better questions, not as the final answer. Because in the end, the benchmark is beautifully simple, simple enough to remember for the rest of your life. Cream and salt, 2 words. When you see them and little else, you're holding the real thing. When you see a paragraph of ingredients you can't pronounce, you're holding something that's counting on you not to look. Now you'll look. If this was useful to you, leave your like, because it genuinely helps this reach more people who need to see it. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Tell me down below which butter is in your fridge right now, and I'll see you in the next video. Read the label and let the truth do the choosing.